What up, y'all? This is Patrick Hayes, and today I want to talk about the understanding of belief versus knowing. And then I want to share with you guys a tool of what I use to kind of keep myself grounded as I'm exploring all of this mind-expanding, esoteric, metaphysical, new age, paranormal stuff. Because there's so much stuff out there that is mind-expanding. If we don't have some sort of technique for grounding it or staying integrated, we really can run away into delusion. This is one of the things that I'm feeling myself keep coming back to in my videos, because I see so many people that are new to these like amazingly mind-expanding ideas, but they don't really have a method of grounding the information. And as a result, they start building philosophies like houses of cards based off all these little flecks of information that aren't fully grounded, and the information is not fully integrated and not deeply enough understood. So what happens is they kind of build these fantasy worlds out of it. And then a lot of people are actually gaining information and developing their own belief systems based off of these house of card fantasy worlds that other people have built that are now sharing across the internet space, and it's not looking good in that realm. So I want to kind of bring some clarity back into that realm of how to balance ourselves, right? Because the other issue we have to be aware of is that there's this new age trend. It's a trend. And so it's cool to be psychic, it's cool to be interdimensional. And so, and the fact that there's no kind of regulating force to create valid merits on these different levels of paranormal experience and metaphysics, since there's nothing regulating it, it creates this kind of free-for-all for people to kind of dabble in the information and just build these fantasies and then start claiming that they're these crazy interdimensional wizard people, and where the majority of it's just delusion. And I'm sure that you guys have noticed this, right? There's people doing weird healing techniques or claiming that they're guardians of this gate and all this kind of stuff. And while I'm not saying that all of that is bullshit, I'm saying the majority of it is bullshit. And it's important for us to really ground this information. See, when you look back to actually all the pioneers for this kind of stuff, and it goes back way, way back in history, we just say the ancient Tibetan texts, or ancient yogic traditions, or even in the West we could say people like Rudolf Steiner or Max Heindel, or all these different people that have really brought these metaphysical sciences to some sort of text, or have brought it to the collective consciousness. When we're studying these old texts, we start building ideas off of them, but these originators that brought it forward, they were highly scientific in the way that they were exploring things. Now, not scientific in the sense of how we view the scientism religion, this flatland, only physical reality exists. But what I mean is that they're using scientific methods to explore non-physical and subjective experiences, right? So they're not limiting themselves the way that a lot of mainstream science limits itself, but they're still nonetheless using scientific methodology for exploring these things. It's not just, I had a thought that clicks with some other ideas that I heard, and so now that's another belief that is true, and now I'm building on top of that and building on top of that. Because that just creates, like I said, a house of cards of delusion. So we have things like psychic ability, we have things like astral projection, we have things like remote viewing, we have things like interdimensional energy matrices. We have all these kinds of different things that have valid truths associated with them. But like I said, with a watered down understanding of it, people just go crazy. And you see this affecting so many people. You see people with the desire to be something important, and then seeing this spectrum of this demographic of the community, that it's like a free-for-all, anything goes. You can just go and claim anything, and people are like, wow, I can just claim myself as being some master of some weird, obscure metaphysical thing that I'm creating and making up on my own. And if I can say it and ground it in some sort of loose ideological logic, then I can claim it, and who's to tell me that it's not true? Because I got the download. I was told by my guides. In fact, that's a great spiritual bypass, is no, I'm not going to. I remember there's this one guy that was doing, he was counseling a guy that I knew on sovereign law. And this guy was up against the court here in Sedona, and he was facing a lot of time. And this guy that was counseling him had taught him so much about, sovereign law and how to litigate and all this stuff. And so he was going in and he was litigating with his own life on the line. He was litigating, and he followed all the recommendations, but he got locked up in jail and he got sentenced to a year in prison. And this guy then, who was supposed to be like, his sovereign litigator lawyer friend, he just stopped helping him. Even though he was in jail, he walked away from it, and his excuse was, oh, well, my guides told me that this was not a battle to fight anymore. And so this is just an example of spiritual bypassing, where it's like, no, dude, that was your friend, and he's locked up because he followed your advice. And you sold him this whole idea of how to litigate, and you told him everything was going to be fine, and it was all going to work out. But he went to jail because of you, and now you're stepping away from him because your guides told you. But this is just an example of how using the idea of spiritual guides or some sort of unprovable metaphysical made up thing can create an opportunity for people to follow ego desires. Maybe he was afraid to litigate, so he didn't want to get in trouble himself, so he backed out of it and stopped helping his friend. And that was the real reason, but he could say it was because of his guides. Anyway, my point is that these kinds of motivations are motivating a lot of people. A lot of people want to be something important. And since this is an unregulated field, well, I can just claim that I'm the master of this. Where it's like, if you're going to be claim that you're like a master in the academic world, it's like, dude, show me your credentials. And I'm not saying the academic world's system for credentials is up to par with what I think that it should be. But what I'm saying is there is a system of credentials, and there's a way beyond just convincing other people that you have it figured out that can be somewhat quantifiable. Like there's a standard to be held to. And I think that's something that's really important. So I think it's important that we start holding ourselves and the community up to a certain standard, right? Is what you're expressing actually practically applicable? Is it useful? Is it creating some sort of measurable change? So if you're teaching something, can people actually validate oh, there's a measurable change in my life and things are improving beyond just placebo, beyond just the idea of well, I'm suggestible, so and I want to create change, and so they tell me something and I feel good after they say that, so that's change. But actually map it out over time. And then is it repeatable, right? Can we use somewhat of a scientific method to ground a lot of these, esoteric ideas that we're running away with? So this is something I want to kind of encourage amongst the community. Now, one of the things that I do that really helps me stay grounded is this idea of percentages when it comes to belief systems. So it's very rare that I will have a belief system where I'm this is 100%. In fact, if it's a belief system, it's never 100%. There are certain knowings that I have, but I'm also aware that even though I may have a certain knowing, that there's always more to that knowing that I can accumulate. So it's never fixed in that knowing. Though it may be true, there's always more truth that I can add to that, right? And that would be what I consider knowing. But then there's beliefs, right? And beliefs, the way that I work with beliefs is in a percentage sense. So I actually entertain a lot of conflicting beliefs. But then I usually lean towards which of out of the conflicting beliefs, which one seems to have the higher percentage of probability. And so I work more with probabilities and percentages. And this is actually a great way of not getting stuck in different ideologies. Because what happens oftentimes is that we'll read about the law of attraction, or we'll see a video about this and we'll see a video about that. And because certain beliefs are, or certain notions that are expressed in that become exciting to us, we'll grab those things and just make it a rigid part of our belief system. And we'll start building a lot of different ideas on top of that. But the problem with that is that once we've invested a lot in these belief systems that we've started building, then we're not willing to look at something else as being a possibility, and therefore become locked in those ways of thinking. And those ways of thinking could very well not be accurate. And this is why the scientific method is so important. Scientific method is the idea, or one of the ways of expressing the scientific method is that you have a hypothesis and you create a test, and then you basically try to poke holes in it to see if it stands. And if you can try to poke holes and your theory stands, it stays sturdy, then that's proof that that may be true, right? And it's kind of a different approach when we deal with esoteric, magical stuff, where it's more if it's working, then it's true. But it's not necessarily about poking holes in it. And I think it's finding like a balance between those two. It's like we have to realize that, you know, consciousness does affect how things play out. So if we want to understand something beyond placebo, you know, we have to do like a double-blind study, right? But I think it's important for us to try to poke holes in these ideologies. Like, see, do these things actually work? Do an experiment with ourselves. Like, see, you know, how is the law of attraction actually working for us? How is that expressed? Because how I see people talking about the law of attraction, this is cockamamie to me, a lot of people. Though there's truth in the law of attraction. But I think it's like, try to poke holes in that. Use somewhat of a scientific approach to explore some of these esoteric ideas. And in fact, I have a friend of mine, we've been talking about this, and we want to actually to do more of these kinds of experiments where we can like experiment with some of these metaphysical ideas and create experiments surrounding them, even double-blind experiments where we actually measure things and see how well they hold up under that scrutiny. So what I'm encouraging is that we start taking more of this approach in our personal development, in our metaphysical development, in our spiritual development. That we take some of these ideas that seem so exciting to us and we try to poke holes in them. We explore experimenting with them and do it more without so much of a bias, without so much of a need to make it true, but actually more of a desire to know the truth, right? Instead of a desire to make something that we want to believe true, a desire to know what the actual truth is and explore it in a scientific kind of way. And by doing that, what we're going to be able to do is we're going to see what, when we poke holes in, falls, and we're going to see what, when we try to poke holes in, actually stands. And that's going to give us a sturdy footing so that we can move forward on this path without running away into delusion. So thanks so much for tuning in. This is Patrick Hayes. Like, subscribe, share with your friends, and I will talk to you next time. One love.
If you liked the video you just saw and you want to support me in bringing more content like that to you, donate to my Patreon page. There's a link pinned in the comments below, and when you donate to the page, you get access to all sorts of cool giveaways, like exclusive content, free music downloads, monthly group chats with me, and more. Now, every single donation that comes in goes directly to improving the quality and the quantity of my content. So thanks so much for your support, and I'll see you on the flip side.